All right, Sihiye Mishakeila. We are learning a Maamar about the verses from Parshas Mishpatim of Sihiye Mishakeila Karbad Bisbar Male. There will be no bereaved or barren woman in your land. They'll fill the number of your days. And that follows the verse of Va'avadatem, Esavaya Lokechem. V'erches lachmecha v'esmemecha, v'asiresi machla mekirbecha, and you shall serve Havaya, your Elokechem, and he will bless your bread and your water, and remove illness from your midst. So, where we are right now, we learned two of the main ideas of the Maamar, and we're about to enter into the third idea that the Maamar discusses. What have we learned so far? We discussed what is this idea of serving God. Does God need our service? When we serve God, then we get blessings in exchange. What is going on here? Why would God need our service? That doesn't make sense. Why would he need anything? And that was the first section that we kind of covered, especially because these two verses have the three fundamental brachos of living. They have livelihood, they have health, and children, healthy, thriving children. So when you got all these set, then you're good. So all I have to do is serve God and then I'll get it. Is that how this exchange works? And that's when we started on the whole thing to talk about, does our service actually affect God or not? The first answer we gave is on the higher, the realms that are above creation, the dimensions, the aspects above creation are not affected, and the dimensions that are lower, aspects that are lower are affected, which kind of makes sense because we know that there's the whole system. Remember our spiritual ecological waterfall system. So when we do stuff, we are drawing down divine light into the world, and if we don't do what we're not supposed to do, we don't draw it down. Or also, if we do something that's a transgression, then we could puncture that whole system. On that level, we can understand that our service makes a difference. But the higher level, first we say, no, it doesn't make a difference. And then we say, but that doesn't fully make sense because in middle of these verses, we have a pronoun change. We go from third person to first person. Serve God, and I will bless. Where's I? Where did I come in? And that brought us into the idea of the capital N narrative of the Torah. Who narrates the Torah? Who tells us about Havaya and Moshe and all these things? Only dimension, aspect that is above all that. And that's what we call Atzmos, the essence of God. So the highest dimension of God narrates the Torah to us. Originally we said, but I thought that level's not affected by the mitzvahs we do because that level is above creation. It seems to have no relationship to creation. But all of a sudden, I will remove illness, all of a sudden it's the middle of this. All of a sudden it came into this narration. So what's going on here? That brought us to the whole idea. Actually, essence is quote unquote affected. Actually, essence does care about what we do. Now, the difference though is that essence cares about the long run per se. Essence cares about the total picture, everything coming together. The purpose of creation, to refine man in creation. Atzmos cares about that. The details of how we bring that about, the mitzvahs, that's more of the level of Havaya and creation and Elokim and all that kind of stuff. That's quote unquote the lower dimensions deal with that. Atzmos does care about the completion of everything because that's what we're doing here. That's what this is all about. Operating at a level that will achieve this, the refinement of man in creation, is the kind of level, operating at this level is what elicits that Atzmos is drawn down to the sense where it's not just, oh, I'll keep you healthy and everything will be good, but removing illness, changing a state of nature. You have a much higher power that's being brought in. So that's the first thing that we said, our service making difference, yes or no. The second idea that we looked at is what is service? What is this actual service that we're talking about? Starting with that, we said service is servant to the master. The servant, whatever his personal thoughts, feelings, etc., desires are, that is all set aside in service to the master. Whether or not these things align with what the master wants, it doesn't matter. The servant does what the master desires. That is a fear-based approach. That is a submission-based approach. That is all good for doing what we're supposed to do. We have Boda'ani, is not just thanks, but it's also acknowledgement. We have Hudu Hashem in our davening. So we starting the day, our daily service, all of it starts with level of acknowledgement, not just praise, but also acknowledgement to say we recognize that which is beyond our understanding. We recognize the truth of it and we submit to it. But that's not the end game, because part of the Maamar that we saw from the altar, about the snippet from there, is that what do we say that we acknowledge God's correctness? What is that supposed to mean? God, we're not sure if you're correct, but okay, I guess you are correct. No, us acknowledging God's state of existence, in which he is the true existence, and everything else is just some extension. We are not a something from nothing, but a nothing from something, because God is the real something. We see ourselves as being a something, and God, we call it nothing, not because he's not in anything, but it's this indescribable thing that we don't really understand. So we acknowledge that this is the truth. Now, what comes after acknowledgement? We get to a level of bracha. Bracha is to draw down godliness to the world. And what's the connector? How do you go from acknowledgement, which would be fear-based, to bracha, which would be drawing down godliness into the world? The connector over there is ava, which is love. Fear-based starts the journey of the servant, but that's not the end. What actually takes us to the next level is love of God. We also have to have love of God, and we see that predominantly through prayer, because prayer is called the service of the heart. And the whole idea of during prayer is that your godly soul, it has full connection to its source, gets fully powered up, and through that, it can then influence the animal soul. It's going to talk to the animal soul in terms that it understands to say, hey, this whole world that you love, this whole world that you're chasing after, you know who made it, you know who it's here for, you know what we're supposed to be doing with it, to influence all of its passions, drives, and energy, and lead it toward a godly end and purpose. Davening is going to achieve both of those, and we have to have davening through love to fully achieve that and achieve it at the right kind of way. And that brought us to the idea that the language of Avodah, the language of service, divine service, is from Ibud Urs, which is tanning hides. There's a process to the refinement. You start off with something rough and coarse, something that would be materialistic, and you actually have to go through the process. It can't just be what you're naturally going to follow. Some people have fear of God naturally. That's not enough because you haven't actually worked to change yourself. So we need fear to keep us in line and then love to motivate us to change. And that motivation to change, that actual change is going to be a process. We actually have to work ourselves to get there. But achieving that, that's how we have complete and full divine service, this level of divine service, this standard that we're trying to reach. That ends the second kind of idea that the Maamar is presenting to us and explaining to us. Now we're entering into the third part. The Maamar is not officially split up like this, but this is kind of the third idea that the Maamar is teaching us. Now looking at what are the spiritual counterparts of the verses that we saw from the beginning. When we're talking about a bereaved or barren woman, what does that look like in spiritual terminologies? And we'll see also how that redefines everything. So going back to the verse, it says, Lo Sihiye Mishakeila, there'll be no bereaved or barren woman. If we remember, we said there will be no bereaved or barren woman. There shall not be. Is that a command or a promise? Remember, we said the language could be understood in both ways. And so originally we said, well, it's both. It's a command and a promise. Do what you're supposed to, and then the promise will come through. Now, in a literal sense, in a physical sense, we're not really sure how we're supposed to do anything about that, because these are not things that are by choice. God forbid, a miscarriage or someone who can't conceive, that's not necessarily a choice, so I don't know how we're supposed to do anything about this. But what we're looking at now is how can we actually fulfill it? Well, in the spiritual way, we can do something about this. What do we mean, this whole idea of a woman conceiving, giving birth? What are we talking about here? So this brings us to Tanya, one of the first chapters of Tanya, chapter 3, where it says Chabad, Chachma Bina Das. Chabad, the intellectual faculties are called the mothers and source of the midot. Midot are the attributes. Sometimes you see the word midot as character traits, but here we're talking about the 10 soul powers, the 10 divine attributes. For the midot, our offspring are derived from Chabad. The emotive state comes from the intellectual state. So the intellectual faculties are the parents to the emotive faculties. Wisdom is the father, Bina is the mother, understanding is the mother, because wisdom gives Bina a spark of an idea, the same way a father gives a packaging, so the mother turns that into a baby, and then through that it is supposed to elicit something, love or awe of God, etc., and all the emotions that follow after that. You're supposed to think about God so that you will feel something toward God. The explanation of the matter is as follows: that intellectual faculty of the rational soul that first conceives any matter, the faculty which produces the seminal point of an idea and the first flash of illumination, is called Chachma, composed of the words Koachma, the potential of what is. Chachma, if you switch the letters slightly around, Koachma, the power of what, as in a potential for something to be. This is also how we have the idea of Chachma being a place without ego, because it's a what, state of being nothingness. But here we're talking about the flash of an idea, the spark of a concept. When one brings forth this concentrated idea for the potential into the actual, that is when one cogitates with his intellect on the seminal point to understand a matter full well, and delves to its very depths as it evolves from the concept which he had conceived in his intellect, when he apprehends in a detailed manner the seminal point of intellect, which prior to his cogitation was but a nebulous point of Chachma, this is called Bina. As in, instead of having a flash epiphany moment that comes and goes, if you grab onto it and then you sit and develop it and you examine it from all sides, and the length and the breadth, etc. of the idea, this is the process of Bina, the process of understanding. Again, that's why it correlates to the gestation of a baby. 9 months, it turns into a being. Bina is the faculty which elucidates the details of any concept and apprehends it full well and in depth. They, Chachma and Bina, are the very father and mother which give birth to love of God and awe, yira, and dread, pachad of Him. Chachma and Bina, wisdom and understanding, which are kind of generalized translations of these terms, these are the parents. Your intellect is the parent of your emotions. The main emotions are love and fear of God. Av and yira, we've spoken about that so many times. There are other attributes that stem from either of those sides. That's what we're always talking about. You got to think about God, you got to study about God, you got to learn about God, and that will elicit an emotion. That emotive state should lead to an action, because when you feel about something, you should do something about it. So where are we going with this? Now that we're mentioning parents and offspring, considering the Maamar, where do you think we're going? So Akara, what is a barren woman, God forbid? He she'eni yoled despun, if she doesn't give birth. Someone who is barren, she can't conceive. There's no children. Dakaya alamidos ava v'yira shava hi bechinas ben v'yir hi bechinas bas. So an Akara doesn't give birth to children, referring to love and fear, which are the offspring of meditation. For love is the level of son and fear is the level of daughter. How do we see that? We see in Tehillim, Zachar chastov amunasa lebeis Yisrael. He remembered his kindness and his faith to the house of Israel. That's what the verse of Tehillim says. But if you know Hebrew, Zachar, to remember, if you change the vowels a little bit, Zachar means a male. So it's taking that word, kind of pun on the word, and saying, see how kindness, love, is considered a male attribute. But I should say male. It's considered a masculine attribute, which we'll explain in a second. So love is the masculine attribute. Why is it the masculine attribute? Because love is about, remember, expansionness. It's about givingness. How does that correlate here? Because the father gives the DNA packaging to the mother, who turns it into a child within her own self. That self-discipline level is considered a feminine trait. Well, so you see, sometimes it's a little funny to hear the description of father, mother, etc., but you can see how it actually correlates. You can't have one without the other. There's no child without both contributions. But yes, on the one hand, one is just a handing over of something. Love, in general, is the outpouring of something. It's the giving over of something. That's why it's water rushes forth. I was on Instagram today, and somebody that I know had posted a reel, and I held myself back from what I wanted to comment, because it was a reel about, like, loving others as yourself. We always give love to other people, but what about the love for ourselves? And what I wanted to write is self-love is nonsense. So much nonsense. And what I mean by that, so, oh, well, you're not supposed to love yourself? No. The current iteration of self-love is a bunch of self-centered, narcissistic garbage. And they're not going to tell you that, but I'll tell you that. Because love is supposed to be given to somebody else. You already have an inherent love within yourself. The Torah doesn't command you, love yourself. It says, love someone as yourself. You're like, well, how could that be possible? Because you have an inherent love to yourself. We saw that in the Yisrael Maamar. You're a little bit more forgiving of yourself. Even when you're hard on yourself, you have excuses for why you behave the way you did. You contextualize yourself differently and rationalize for yourself differently than you do for other people. Even someone who's hard on themselves, because we naturally have a self-interest, a self-motivation, self-preservation that's wired into our very being and existence. And somebody who doesn't have that, we recognize that there's something not right with them. We recognize that it's a sickness that someone, God forbid, self-harms. That is not healthy, because we know that's not the state that we're supposed to be in. And we recognize that there are extreme levels. This is not a healthy state to be in. It doesn't mean all day long you have to be talking about how great you are, but we recognize that there's healthy levels and what's not a healthy level. But this whole idea of the self-love thing that's been promulgated throughout society these days is a very self-centered, narcissistic thing. Stop worrying about your own love and start giving to other people. That's what it's supposed to be about. For your own self, think more, a little bit more along the lines of respect of yourself. Remember the sikh about the different kind of watchmen. How do you operate in the world? Do you think, oh, I'm going to guard this thing for you and then I get payment for it? Do I guard it for free? All that kind of stuff. God, He made me, so that's something to be said for me. He gave me the soul that I have to watch over and protect and watch over the soul in this body that He made for me. I'm borrowing something. I got to take care of what I've got. I don't have to sit all and pontificate about how much I love myself. It's not relevant for you to get your job done in the world. So respect is a little bit more in line with it. It's a little bit more of a self-discipline thing. The whole idea of self-love, especially the way that we do everything today, as soon as you put self hyphenate, just chuck it. This is probably not a good thing to be following. It's a perversion. Love is supposed to be for somebody else. It's an outpouring. And if you turn it back into yourself, you're perverting the nature of love. But I didn't write any of that. And I didn't even post my whole essay that I wrote about the lie of self-love. Anyways, you've spoken about it before. So the term masculine is a little bit better of a term than male because everybody has a mix of masculine and feminine traits. There's a whole balance in it. It's woven within the very fabric of creation to have masculine and feminine traits. It's not even about male-female, you know, male-female exhibit in stronger sorts of ways certain things. But we do see that even as far as men and women are concerned, a lot of the way that men are wired, when you think about provider and protector, they want to be a hero and that kind of stuff, that's not a self thing, that's a something else thing. Men achieve when they can protect somebody else, when they can provide for somebody else. That's when men are usually at their best. In service for somebody else, that's an outward going thing. Women, on the other hand, as far as nurturing and stuff goes, but woman intuition, that's a more internal thing. A woman being in tune to other people, that's much more of an internal thing. It leads to then caring for other people, but where that process is starting is something that's much more internal. And that's where women are at their best. Anyways, why do we say that love is the sun? Is that's we're looking at this verse here where we kind of have that pun for that. This is from Mishle. You might recognize this. Sheker achen vehevel hayofi isha yiras Hashem hi tisalo. So that's from Eshet Chayil. Eshet Chayil is from Mishle, Proverbs, written by King Solomon. Charm is false and beauty is not. A God-fearing woman is to be praised. So here, isha yirat Hashem hi tisalo. Isha yirat Hashem. It's correlating fear with female. Fear, which is a feminine thing. Fear is a receiver. Masculine trait is to be a giver. Love is giving. Love is about expansionness, greatness, givingness. Remember we did the sikh about Avram and Yitzchak. Love wants to go outward. It's givingness, expansionness, as we just said. Fear is a receiver because it's going to take it in and turn it into something else. The same way that's what a woman does. So you take it and you hold it within. That's more of a self-discipline sort of thing. That's why Yitzchak, who represents fear, is more about digging wells. It's more of an internal state. Women are much more in tune with the quote-unquote internal state of being. What's that results in? That's discipline, awe, etc. So when we're looking at what an akar is, that's someone that the intellectual process is not resulting in children, as in their Chabad state is not leading to an emotive state. And that is why in spiritual terminologies, this is considered somebody who is barren. What is a Mishakeila? Mishakeila, he should let us avavira elashen lam kiyum. A Mishakeila, someone who we call here the bereaved woman, someone who, God forbid, miscarries or has to bury her young, God forbid. So a Mishakeila is someone who gives birth to love and fear, but they do not endure. So the Chabad state results in Ava and Yira, results in love and fear, but they don't endure. So think of like you're coming off of a high of an inspiration or something like that, but then what happens the next day and the day after that? Does that last you longer than a short amount of time? Now that we've introduced this, now we could see how the command and promise come in. Because how can it be a command not to be barren or bereaved or barren woman? How can it be a command? Because we're looking at what the spiritual states are. These are things that we actually could do something about. So when we look at Lo Sihiye Mishakeila Karbatzecha, there will be no bereaved or barren woman in your land. Contemplation, meditation, study about God, thinking about God. Now I don't see God in my life. Well, did you put in there? Have you thought about Him for a few minutes? Contemplation, meditation must be done in a way which not only elicits emotion, but emotion which endures. Then Vavatem will be as it should. How do we make sure that our divine service is going to be as it should, which is obviously a journey. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. Remember, tanning the hides is a process to this, is when we will engage in what we're supposed to be doing, contemplation, meditation, study, etc., 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 that results in love and fear of God, an emotive state, which will lead to the divine service, remember, of submission and of prayer and all that kind of stuff. Not just that I did well today, but every day, that it's going to carry me through all the days. Looking further about that, there's two types of akar. So we'll start looking at the first type of akar. Akar as in the barren woman. So an akar could be somebody who has no womb, as in somebody who literally lacks the means to fall pregnant. So this is from Yevamos, which is from the Gemara. Rav Nachman said, that Avu said, our mother Sarah was initially an Eilonit. As it is stated, and Sarah was barren, she had no child. The superfluous words, she had no child, indicate that she did not even have a place, a womb for a child. Remember, Sarah couldn't have a child for a long time? So the sages say, actually, she literally didn't have a womb in her. Bereshis Rabbah, we'll just finish here. I will bless her and also give you a son. So Bereshis Rabbah means from the book of Bereshis. I will bless her and I will also give you a son from her. I will bless her and she shall become nations. Kings of people will be from her. I will bless her and also give you a son from her. I will bless her. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nechemia, Rabbi Yehuda says, I will bless her by giving her a son, and I will bless her with the blessings of milk. Rabbi Nechemia said to him, well, she already giving tidings regarding milk, as if she's been able to feed her child, right? Why? She was not even pregnant yet. Rather, it teaches that the Holy and blessed be He restored her body to the days of her youth. Rabbi Bau, in the name of Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina, God said, I will impose fear of her over all the idolaters. They will not torment her or call the barren woman. Rabbi Yudin, in the name of Rev Shalakish, she did not even have a womb, and the Holy and blessed be He not carved out a womb for her. So going back and forth about the language that's being used here in the pasuk, but going to the end of it, what's the punchline of it, is that it's talking about a barren woman in literal sense, especially when we look at the foremothers. We see with Sarah, and we have another one that shows up with Rivka, that they literally didn't have the capacity to conceive. They literally didn't have the physical organ that was necessary for it. And then, of course, we're going to see what that means in the spiritual sense. That's somebody who might have an intellectual capacity. They might have intellectual parents available to them. First, they have to ignite the intellectual process, but it's not necessarily going to come forth if they don't fix themselves in certain kind of ways. Okay, so here we see also from Bereshis Rabbah, a different part, commentary of the Medrash on Bereshis, says, V'yater Yitzchak l'Hashem l'nochach ishto. Yitzchak entreated Hashem opposite his wife. So Sarah, we know Sarah was barren for many, many years. So she found Yitzchak at 90, and then Rivka was also barren for many years. So whether it's because originally she was too young to even have a child, but she didn't have a child for a long time. And Hashem acceded to his entreaty, and Rivka, his wife, conceived. That's the verse. Commentary. Yitzchak entreated V'yetar, Hashem opposite his wife, that either says they literally daven in opposite corners or whatever it is. Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan said, because he poured out prayers abundantly, so Ba'osher, it's correlating that word. Reish Lakish said, because he overturned the decree. On that basis, they call a pitchfork atra, as it overturns the grain, opposite his wife. So he said the word V'yetar is connected to the word for a pitchfork, because it's turning something over, as the motion of the pitchfork is. Opposite his wife, it teaches that Yitzchak was prostrated here, and she was prostrated there, and he was saying, Master of the universe, all the children that you're giving me will be from this righteous woman, because Yitzchak never took a second wife. Avram married Hagar, the mother of Ishmael. Then later it says that he married Keturah and had a bunch of children, so whether that's Hagar, etc. And then Yaakov had a bunch of wives. But Yitzchak is the only forefather who only had one wife. He had a special holy status. She too said so. All the children that you are destined to give me will be from this righteous man, because she was barren. Rabbi Yudin, in the name of Reish Lakish, she did not have a uterus, and the Holy and blessed be fastened a uterus for her. Is that the same word? One says uterus and one says womb. Either way, it's talking about Sarah and Rivka that they literally physically couldn't have. We're correlating this in the spiritual terminologies. Timtam alev, ela she'en lo afilu hisbal l'sichlis, shezeu inyan timtam amoch. In divine service, lack of a womb, as in someone who's barren who literally can't conceive. There's someone who can't conceive because they can't conceive, and then someone who can't conceive because they literally don't have the womb to conceive. We're looking at that part. Lack of a womb is not only an absence of love and fear in the heart, which would be an insensitive heart or a dull heart, but also lack of intellectual excitement in the mind, an insensitive mind or a dull mind. Emotions come from understanding charged with energy. Remember, the intellect is the parent of the emotions. So somebody who is barren is not just somebody who's not getting to the motive state. It's somebody who intellectually, they're not even fired up to make an emotion come out of it. Think about if you're thinking about something lazily, that's not going to lead you to the motive state. Think about something abstractly or whatever, that's not going to lead you to a motive state. You have to think about something in energy with concentration. You have to really think about something in a way that's going to get you fired up to the motive state. What does it mean that he lacks the ability to receive? Because masculine is the giver, feminine is the receiver, and it takes it and turns it into a whole new life. He lacks the ability to receive because he's already filled with other things, as in his own desires and satisfactions, be they holy, type of service, permitted, or otherwise. And the nature of man is that a full vessel can't hold other things. That's why when we're overly stressed, we break down and cry. That's actually true, but whatever. Thus, he won't be able to grasp the truth in his mind to evoke intellectual excitement. So what does it mean that somebody who literally can't conceive? We're saying that you're so full of your own worries and concerns, and we're not even talking about things that aren't okay. Someone might have desires for other things, that's kind of understood. We're talking about someone who might even just be worried about their own real stuff. But someone you're so full of your own real stuff, nothing can enter. Unlike God, that you could have multiple dimensions existing, you can just keep putting, we're limited. We have limited capacity. My brain is too full to handle this right now. Ever said that before? I can't take in anything more right now. If I can't take in anything more right now, in spiritual terminologies, that results in quote unquote barren, as in you're not giving birth to love and fear right now, because your intellect can't even take in anything else. So So this kind of state, what does it mean, command and a promise? How does the command work for us here is that we have to be able to look at our own selves. It doesn't matter what we're worried about. You could be even worried about your own spiritual state, and still that is you being concerned on your own self. Remember what we said before about as soon as you append the self hyphen something, self hyphen another word, as soon as you start doing that too much, you don't have space for anything left. Remember also the time we spoke about when it talks about submitting to God, how do you get to the number 9? 5 plus 4 is 9. 6 and 3 is 9. 7 and 2 is 9. And each time it depends which number you're going to be and how much space there is for something else. But 9 is also 9 plus 0. The more quote unquote you are 0, putting everything else aside, the more God is going to come in. So in this kind of state, if a person's like, I don't feel anything toward God. Okay, well, what are you filled with right now? Your own concerns. Again, even holy concerns. So we're not even talking about you should be thinking about whatever you just binged or something. We're not even talking about that. That's a little bit more obvious, that you're so full of materialistic concerns. But even good and holy concerns. The fact that I am self-centered right now, that I'm self-oriented right now, means I don't have space now for something else to come in. Something else can come in, then of course you're not going to reach the emotive state. That goes back to the original thing that we said about a servant as somebody who totally puts their own self aside. Good or not good, everything is just shoved out of the way. This is not important right now. We have to focus on what the service is. This is the first type of a car that we're looking at right now, is someone who literally can't quote unquote conceive, someone who literally can't give birth to love and fear because they literally don't have space for anything to happen. They literally don't have the functioning capacity for it to be taken in. We're seeing now how the transference works and how it's actually something that is incumbent upon us to do something about, to be able to achieve our maximum divine service.